as long as the Taliban don't start seeing themselves as those who are responsible for the well-being of their people, as long as the mindset doesn't change from rulers to servants, we'll constantly be faced with these issues. The reality is that the Taliban have a very different vision for Afghanistan compared to the intellectuals or the educated urbanites that Afghanistan had. I mean, the fact that you start your activism means that you're not happy with the status quo. And that's a shared common sentiment between us and the international Afghans or the diaspora. And that's very understandable. It's easier when you're on the ground, when you see the reality. So you're basing your judgments on experiences you see. You have to understand there's something called a pseudo-environment. You're told to have a lens and see the world through it. And unfortunately, a lot of our diaspora, due to a very complex system or machine that's producing propaganda, don't end up seeing things in Afghanistan as they are. Not to say things are perfect, they're far from it. But there's always room to change things and make things better and stop things from deteriorating. Well, it's tricky. I think when you ground your expectations in tangible outcomes, activism becomes difficult. So we're hoping that we start a discussion, and even if, God forbid, the schools are shut down permanently, at least we would have gone down swinging. At least we would have tried to do something about it. Well, I think it's an attitude question to begin with. As long as the Taliban don't start seeing themselves as those who are responsible for the well-being of their people, as long as the mindset doesn't change from rulers to servants, we'll constantly be faced with these issues. The reality is that the Taliban have a very different vision for Afghanistan compared to the intellectuals or the educated urbanites that Afghanistan had. And there has to be a conversation and a synthesis of both visions for us to arrive at something sustainable. As long as both sides are adamant on having the world or Afghanistan to be exactly how they want it, we'll keep seeing each other as the others, as the enemy. And again, the pejorative is on the government. They have to start changing this mindset. They have to create room for dialogue, for discussion, for discourse. And sadly, we haven't been seeing enough of that so far. I mean, something that I've been shouting at the top of my lungs for the past 1.5 years has been people-to-people contact. As long as people don't come together, the major barriers of probably the states or elements of the state playing a negative role in the way the citizens of each country are seen, to a large extent, at least in Afghanistan, has gone away. So there's a lot of room to do work and bring people together. And there are a lot of cooperation. I mean, recently when I traveled, our volleyball team was there at a tournament, and that's a huge thing. Our players are getting an opportunity to engage in events and have exposure. So there's so much in the avenues of sports and arts and academia that we can engage with, and that people-to-people contact. It's during these difficult times. Unfortunately, our difficult times don't end, but that's beside the point. But in these times, really, the Pakistani nation can show that they were good neighbors, their brothers to the Afghans. And let's hope that then that memory stays and we can grow something beautiful out of it. Well, When the Republic first came to power in 2001, the impression was that the enemy had been defeated and everything was going to be peaceful here on forth. It was that unfounded confidence in circumstances that led to things deteriorating very fast in 2003. I'm really worried that that might actually become the reality of Afghanistan, and we have to make sure that that does not happen. Counterinsurgency is a very delicate matter, and I don't think that brutality can be fought with brutality. So there has to be some nuance in your approach. You have to win over your enemy. And the current approaches of CT is very heavy-handed. I've written about it, and I think that ends up creating more enemies than friends. And I'm hoping that there is a reliance on expertise and a reliance on previous experiences so that the mistakes of the past 40 years of Afghanistan in intelligence aren't repeated, and we can for once make sure that a spell of peace can become hopefully a decade of peace. I think one of the major barriers is traveling between both countries, and you could have a lot of amazing initiatives, but the barrier is always going to be, can people travel? Can people move between both countries? And that's your first impression. I've said this before, something that a lot of embassies in Afghanistan had done was when you walked in there, you felt welcome. Yet the embassy in Pakistan was always very difficult to access. The visa was very difficult to get. Even now, there are so many cases of corruption and people taking money for a visa that you could get, and then that visa doesn't let you into Pakistan because recently you saw that people were deported from the airport. And it's these things that tear people apart, and we really need to work towards this. So there's a lot of avenues of, we're natural neighbors. We share so much of our culture, of our history. The politics can either bring us together or take us apart, and we have to make a decision as to what path we choose. Well, health is a huge issue in Afghanistan as well. A lot of our patients seek treatment in Pakistan. Processes that facilitate that, make that easier, are going to bring people together. There's much that can be done in academia, much that can be done in messaging campaigns. The fact that most international representatives sit across the table with the Taliban, and the first thing that they do mention is girls' education, is an avenue that Pakistan can really push for and work on with Afghans to make sure that their voices are heard. So again, the Taliban are a very new regime. They're developing, they're learning who they are. And it's in this time that Afghan activists really need to make sure that they're molded into something that is tolerable, that is good for Afghanistan. And the international community can help, and neighbors like Pakistan can help. But there has to be some synergy in our approach, and there has to be some vision to what we want to achieve. Because again, we've seen time and time again, Afghanistan's troubles are never just Afghanistan's problems and troubles. So there's always going to be spillover. And for this region, for the globe, Afghanistan needs to do better for things to look good for everyone. Well, I think the solution never was to let people leave. I mean, yes, most people did have a security reason to leave, but the solution isn't to constantly keep taking Afghans out. Our doctors, our engineers, the same people that the country invested decades in to bring them to where they are today being offered ways to leave the country. And It's not to say that they don't love the country, but everyone wants to feed their family. Everyone wants a shot at a good life. And the solution isn't for people to leave and offer a way for brain flight to continue happening. That being said, we really need to make sure that scholarship programs that have been available for Afghan students from Pakistan, those are enhanced so that whatever vacuum we have can be filled up in the near future. In the medical sector as well, we need to make sure that we create avenues for participation where patients can find treatment within the country rather than having to leave. It makes more sense because immigration at the end of the day is going to be a problem. Traveling is going to be a problem. Most of your dire need cases need to be addressed within the country. So if we have exchange programs for doctors, if we have exchange programs for people in academia, all of those things are going to help bring people together, help fill in the gaps that Afghanistan is facing right now. Well, I think one of the major issues in the past 20 years was the international community's lack of cultural sensitivity and tone deafness when it came to Afghanistan and its idiosyncrasies. Something that we're seeing time and time again, and I already said this to the UN, which was that they are so adamant on condemning the death penalty in Afghanistan, yet they don't realize that countries like the United States and 55 other countries have the death penalty. Somehow this reaction is reserved for Afghanistan at a time where we should be focusing on much larger and more pressing issues that are unique to Afghanistan. So there's a very fine line. Don't obsess over certain issues to an extent that it blinds you to what is more important, but also don't deflect and focus on issues that are so irrelevant that it takes you away from the question or the matter at hand. Politics of small things. As long as we don't start talking about the important things, the smaller things that we can change, and stop obsessing over the larger impasses, only then can we move forward. There's a lot of things that are wrong with the international engagement towards Afghanistan, and messaging like this does not help. Well, I think the circumstances are very difficult, and it's not like we have an abundance of avenues that we can work on. So we have to make sure that Afghanistan finds stability, whether it's with regards to its social order, whether it's its political order. And we need to understand that solutions of Afghanistan are within the country. If all of our neighbors, if the international community for once understands that only Afghans can help build their country, and they need to be supported. Whatever role any other country plays has to be a complement to whatever the Afghans within the country are doing. We will get through this. I mean, no situation is impossible. Afghanistan has dealt with the impossible multiple times before, and we'll come out of this. We, the region, the globe, will hopefully see better days.